Well, we've just emerged from the Christmas season, and today we've read a passage about baptism. So this week, in preparing for this sermon, I found myself contemplating the way that we mark time. Some of us glory in the opportunity to celebrate or to prepare a space, the chance to decorate for Christmas or for a birthday or anniversary. For some of us, can be a very exciting prospect. I'm looking at you, Chancel Guild. The idea of stringing up lights or hanging greenery or ribbons or a great big banner really can be exhilarating. Sometimes it feels like an absolute duty, for better or worse. Duty can sometimes be polarizing. Sometimes it can be an utter inspiration, or it can drum up resentment. So for some of us, decorating or prepping a space can feel like just another task on a long list of things that we need to accomplish. And so while the attempt is still made, it often happens without any intention of true excellence. I tend to fall somewhere in between, if I'm honest. Some years, my living room looks as festive as could be at Christmas time, and other years, like this one, I will admit, the tree was bought but barely decorated. I do try to make an attempt in one way or another, however great, because I believe that marking time is important. In fact, I often find that the more I invest into celebrating or observing any sort of time or ritual, I do seem to get more out of it. I am glad that I figured out this ratio of investment to benefit before having to plan my wedding. My husband Gary and I love people, and we both particularly love attending weddings. So it was very important for both of us to throw a very meaningful and fun wedding that we and all of our guests would remember. Because we were marking a very important time, not just for the two of us, but for our families and for all of our intersected communities. On that day, we declared the kind of partnership that we wanted to have, and in fact, the life that we wanted to live together. This was a moment in time definitely worth marking, so that it would be remembered. It was so important that it justified the heaps of effort that it takes to throw a wedding bash. For obvious reasons, I hope to never get married again. I really like my husband. But also because I have never worked so hard at planning anything in my life, and I hope that I never have to again. But it was worth it. It was. In the end, we very much wanted our community to bear witness to our commitment to one another and feel like they were part of something special. It also helped knowing that we'd only have to do it once. A baptism, of course, is another important moment in someone's life that is worth the time and investment involved. Even Jesus himself found meaning and importance in this ritual. Though at first glance it can seem a very curious affair that God incarnate wanted to participate this way. When Jesus approaches John, wanting John to baptize him, most of us, I suspect, resonate with John's bewilderment. If we look at baptism as a means of starting fresh and cleansing ourselves, leaving behind our old selves, the baptism of Christ can not make a lot of sense. But if Jesus is God incarnate, what exactly does he need to leave behind? But like any ritual, baptism is multifaceted. Like a wedding vow, a baptism marks intention. It marks the desire to commit to ideals, and it expresses that commitment to all who are gathered as witnesses. So when Jesus steps up to be baptized, I imagine that it is much more about declaring something quite significant. We know from reading and rereading the Gospels together that Christ's deep desire is to reconcile humanity with God and with the knowledge of God's love. A love that saturates our world, challenging and dissolving the idea that God's love is just for some, not for others. As Isaiah puts it, Jesus has come to open the eyes that are blind, to bring out prisoners from their dungeons, and to bring into the light those who sit in darkness. Jesus is here to show God's love and power to those who need it most. And these are not small feats that he is committing himself to. but they are all in the name of justice, or as Jesus calls it in today's scripture, righteousness. I think for Jesus, this baptism is not meant to be a performative or demonstrative action in a condescending, I'm just like you humans sort of way. I think that if we decide to make a commitment so as to honor and serve justice and righteousness, a ritual like baptism can be a very, very powerful way of marking that decision. And rather than making a decision in the dark by himself, Jesus invites others to observe that commitment with him. His baptism was a statement to a crowd of witnesses that he is here for the sake of justice and would live and even die to serve that sake. This baptism was much more like a swearing into office than any sort of renewal. And when you start to think about it, it's actually kind of funny that John resisted the idea of baptizing Jesus. Because despite John heralding Christ's approach, claiming to be unfit to even untie Jesus' sandals, the reason that John baptized anyone was for the sake of righteousness. While Jesus had a special power with which to take on some of the biggest perpetrators of injustice in his time, the only reason to be baptized is because you believe in the justice of God. Not a justice that condemns some and champions others, but a justice that demands equity and welcomes all into God's kingdom. A justice that proclaims hope in the possibility for this world to know peace and practice love. It's not only those who are being baptized who demonstrate this hope, but also the baptizer. Who needs more hope and faith in the world that God has always wanted for us than someone who is performing that ritual over and over again? Jesus didn't go to John because John was somehow holy or good enough. He went to him because John had great hope for God's kingdom being built here on earth. He had the hope of actually seeing it. Like so many others that Jesus interacted with, John's faith is what captivated him. And frankly, to have witnesses gathered at a baptism implicates great faith and hope on the part of those witnesses too. Even just out of curiosity, John often had crowds surrounding him as he baptized people. I can only imagine that hearing John's compelling words and seeing people choose to undergo this ritual of commitment for themselves, seeing these things turned the onlookers' curiosity into hope real fast. So no wonder Jesus wanted John to do the baptizing. John had the hope of God's kingdom and was inspiring it in others. He had the kind of ministry that came with a built-in crowd to witness Jesus swearing into his holy office. So of course we want to think about these things on a day when we are celebrating a baptism here. We've had a number of them in these past few months, and you no doubt are hearing echoes of Dan's descriptions of what we do when we baptize a member of the community. And you'll hear echoes of some of these thoughts in the baptismal prayers and the covenant that we'll participate not too long from now. Typically, each of us will only experience our own baptism once. And for most of us, it will have happened at such a young age, we won't remember it for ourselves, which is okay, because the whole idea is that we are all practicing this ritual together. Dan, as the priest, does the baptizing, and he is practicing that kingdom hope by performing the baptism. We as parishioners here at Transfig, and all of our guests, all of you who have come as friends and family to witness this event, we practice that kingdom hope through the acts of welcome and witness at this baptism today. And while Frederick may not remember all of the particulars of today, Matthew and Jennifer, you are certainly practicing that radical kingdom hope by baptizing Frederick. You echo the voice of God who says, "This is my beloved son." You are making that declaration of understanding God's desire for goodness and righteousness here on earth by stating to your community and to all of us how you intend to raise and instruct your son with the values of God's kingdom to the very best of your ability. And we are so honored to practice and celebrate that radical hope with you. So what are we waiting for? Why don't we move into this time of baptism now? I'll invite each of you to hang on to your bulletins. You'll want to bring those with you. And Chris and the choir will lead us in a song as we move towards the font in the back.